Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The next one is a pro-revenge story. The name's Duke. Private investigator Duke Jackson. The kind of PI who plays by his own rules and always gets the job done, no matter what. This particular job started out like any other. A dame walked into my office with a tale of woe about her low-life ex-husband Sammy. Sammy apparently had a habit of using his wife like a punching bag. A real winner, that guy. The lady wanted me to dig up some dirt on Sammy so she could nail him in the divorce settlement. Seemed like an easy enough gig. Little did I know I was about to walk straight into a minefield. I tracked Sammy down to a rundown apartment on the bad side of town. Turns out he was living in the basement while renting out the rest of the place, scraping by on the meager income. As I watched from my car parked down the block, I saw a mean-looking bruiser of a guy go knocking on Sammy's door, demanding money. Must have been the landlord. Sammy pleaded for more time, but the landlord wasn't having it. Kicked Sammy to the curb right then and there. I tailed Sammy as he drove off in his beat-up old clunker, trying to find a place to lay his head for the night. That's when I got an idea. I made a quick call to the local impound lot, which just so happened to be run by an old pal of mine. We went way back from my days on the force. One favor for a favor. I had Sammy's truck towed and stashed away for safekeeping. Next morning, I placed an anonymous call to Sammy's lawyer and let him know where to find the impounded vehicle. I figured it would light a fire under Sammy to get my client what she wanted out of the divorce settlement. Sure enough, within 48 hours, Sammy caved. My client was satisfied, case closed. I decided to do right by Sammy in the end. Had my buddy leave his truck parked right outside the lawyer's office, keys in the ignition and gas tank full. Sammy walked out of that office broken, but at least he still had his wheels. Wherever he ended up driving off to, I hoped he got back on the straight and narrow. But guys like that usually never change. All in a day's work for Duke Jackson, PI. The cases come and go, but I'm always on call for any dame or gentleman in need. Wherever there's trouble brewing in this town, you can bet I'll be there, ready to rabbit whatever ghosts from the past need to be put to rest. The first one is an entitled people story. I worked my butt off in law school and graduated top of my class. Landing a job at a prestigious firm right out of school was a dream come true. The hours were long and the work was demanding, but I loved every minute of it. A few years in, I decided I wanted a place of my own, something I could call home after long days buried in legal briefs and files. I found this nice little house in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. It was perfect, not too big, not too small, and it had a decent-sized yard. The best part was the price. It was well within my budget. I made an offer, and after signing what seemed like 1,000,000 documents, the house was mine. The first few weeks were great. My neighbors were friendly and welcoming. Well, most of them at least. There was this one woman, who I'll call Karen, you know the type. She gave me weird looks whenever I was out mowing the lawn or getting the mail. I tried being nice and saying hello, but she'd just turn up her nose and walk away. One Saturday morning, I was out doing some gardening when Karen stormed over to my driveway. She started going off about me parking in the wrong spot or something silly like that. I politely told her I didn't realize there were assigned parking spaces in the neighborhood. Apparently, that was the wrong thing to say. Karen lost it. "Don't you know this neighborhood has rules?" she shouted. "Who do you think you are moving in here and ignoring our homeowners association guidelines?" I was confused to say the least. The real estate agent never mentioned anything about an homeowner association when I bought the place. But Karen insisted all homeowners were required to follow the homeowner association rules and threatened to have me fined if I didn't get with the program. I asked her to show me something in writing that proved my property was part of this homeowner association. Karen huffed dramatically and said she'd bring the documents over to educate me. A few hours later, Karen showed up at my door waving a thick stack of papers. "See here," she said, jabbing her finger at one of the pages. "All homeowners in this neighborhood are members of the homeowner association as outlined in Section 3B. I took the documents from her and told her I'd review them and get back to her. After she left, I sat down to read through the giant pile of homeowner association rules and guidelines she'd provided. It outlined things like grass length, fence appearance, holiday decorations, and a whole host of other mundane topics. But nowhere did I see anything confirming my property was bound to this homeowner association. The next day, I decided to get to the bottom of things. I went down to the county clerk's office and requested the property records for my house. As I suspected, there was no mention of any homeowner association in the deed or title documents. My place wasn't part of Karen's crazy homeowner association after all. Armed with the county records, I went to go set Karen straight. She looked annoyed when she opened the door. "Did you look over the homeowner association guidelines?" she asked impatiently. "Yes, and I have some questions," I replied. "According to the county property records, my home is not part of any homeowner association, so I'm not sure why you're trying to enforce these rules on me." Karen's face turned red. "That's absurd," she spat. "All homes in this neighborhood are required to join the homeowner association. It says so right in our bylaws." I shook my head. "Not according to the county clerk records. My property title doesn't mention any homeowner association at all." "Well, those records must be wrong," Karen shrieked. "I'm on the homeowner association board. I think I'd know if your home wasn't part of it." I stayed calm and explained that legally the county property records take precedence over any homeowner association claims. I even showed her the paperwork I'd gotten from the clerk's office. Karen grabbed the documents from me and frantically flipped through them, getting more agitated by the second. "No, no, no, this isn't right," she kept muttering to herself. Finally, she threw the papers down and pointed her finger at me again. "Listen, I don't care what those county records say. You bought a house in this neighborhood, so you have to follow our rules." I'd had enough of her nonsense. "I'm afraid you're mistaken," I said. "Since my property is not part of your homeowner association, I am not bound by any of your rules and guidelines." Karen opened her mouth to respond, but I kept talking. "If you continue to harass me about following your homeowner association policies, I will have no choice but to explore legal options," I warned. Karen's eyes went wide with surprise, like she couldn't believe I was pushing back. She started to say something else, but I turned and walked away before giving her a chance. Over the next few weeks, I kept finding notices taped to my front door with various homeowner association rule violations and threats of fines. Karen and her homeowner association comrades even tried to tow my car at one point for violating parking policies. I'd had enough. I decided to put my law degree to work. I researched the regulations in my state regarding homeowner associations. Sure enough, I found legal precedents confirming properties were not obligated to join an homeowner association unless explicitly outlined in the property deed or title paperwork. Armed with this information, I drafted a strongly worded letter to Karen and her fellow homeowner association board members. I detailed how they had no legal right to enforce their rules on my property, and doing so constituted harassment and misconduct. I included references to the specific state laws and legal cases supporting my position. The letter clearly outlined that if they continued their attempts to impose homeowner association rules on me, I would sue them individually, and the homeowner association as an entity for damages. That seemed to finally get through to them. After receiving my letter, the notices and harassment stopped. Karen still shot me dirty looks, but she kept her distance. I breathed a sigh of relief knowing I could finally enjoy my home in peace without Karen and the homeowner association constantly badgering me. The moral of the story is don't let busybody homeowner association board members intimidate you into following their power trip rules. As a homeowner, know your rights. Don't assume you have to put up with an homeowner association just because you moved into a certain neighborhood. With a little research and firm persistence, you can fight back against homeowner association harassment and prove you're not under their jurisdiction. I was fortunate to have the legal background to easily dispute their claims. But any homeowner can educate themselves and stand up to bullies like Karen. The next one is a petty revenge story. I was on an airplane, and right when we landed, a Karen in the back unbuckled and darted to the front of the plane to get off first. She did not make any eye contact and felt that she was special. I am talking about going from the very last seat on the plane, down the whole row and past first class, basically standing at the little kitchen thing in the front. All this time the seatbelt sign was still on, and we were still rolling down the runway. The flight crew had asked her to return to her seat until we reached the gate, but she was not even responding. Everyone was basically trying to just wait it out. It was a long flight, 8 HRs, and at this point we were exhausted anyways. Nobody said a word. Suddenly the captain announced we had a special guest on board and he will be coming out to greet after we were settled at the gate. The Karen stood there awkwardly until we did the whole, rolling into the gate and whatever planes do when they land for about 15-20 mins. Everyone sat there waiting to see what the captain was talking about. Eventually, the captain came out and asked the lady to please move back a little to get to his special guest, then a little more. Then a little more. He was looking from row to row trying to find a specific person. Everyone is watching and looking around to see who it could be. He kept going and going, asking the Karen to please step back a few more steps each time. Finally, as they approached the rear of the plane, he asked her to sit for a second while he grabbed the intercom at the rear of the plane. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce our special guest sitting in seat 42C. Let's give her a round of applause." The whole plane was wild with laughter and applause. I loved every moment of that. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Many times I'd mentioned during other conversations with them that I'd previously come from the private sector and was not used to how things were run, even after several years in local government. And definitely that those ways would never ever fly in private sector, especially when it came to money. I had been tasked with being the liaison for returning money and personal property to people that were either the victims or the perpetrators. Laws didn't allow us to know which category individuals fell under. But if a judge said, give their property back to them, that's what I did. With the correct paperwork. Period. Of course, there were procedures. Proper paperwork had to be filled out, and a valid current state identification or driver's license, a court order, and an evidence voucher was needed. Everything had to match on all of the paperwork. Their full name, address, city and state, and a property receipt from the police department. If they came to me with a receipt that said John Q. Doe, then their identification had to say the same, not Jack Doe, not JQ Doe. You get it. It was supposed to be a surefire way to make sure that the right person claimed the property, and 99.99% of the time it was money US dollars. And our department was entrusted to follow the rules. Well, the supervisor and the department head, let's call them TD and TL, were both in rare form this particular day during our routine morning meeting when they both had attitudes about everything. It probably had something to do with the fact that they were being applauded for running a tight ship and getting things done. Yeah, right. All they had to do was sign their names to things. The staff did all of the hard work, and yet contradicting everything said between one and the other, and walking around with their chests out like they were God's gifts, and in not so many words both professing I'm the boss. I want it done this way or that way. If I say something, that's the way I want it. Do it and don't question me. Okay, I thought, and I've asked before at other jobs. Are you sure? Really sure? Because I was taught to do just that, give you exactly what you want, and usually people end up not liking it. They both were so nasty in their response that I just smiled at my friend coworker across the table who shook her head and did a facepalm. Why? Because she knows me. Okay, it's on. I'm going to do it your way without question because you two are the boss. At around 11 a.m., I get a call from the security desk that a visitor had arrived with a property receipt, etc., and wanted to know if I would come and collect them to get the process started. Sure, I'll be down in about 10-15 minutes, I told them, as I was in the process of counting money and needed to focus. As on any given day, there was around $100,000 in cash on my desk, and I didn't want to put the money back in the safe and start all over. When I finally finished counting the money and went downstairs to collect the visitor was clearly agitated. Was I bothered? Kind of. But I was secure enough knowing that there were 400 or so officers with guns in the building. So, I led the visitor up to my office, had them seated, took their information, and began the process. Except one. The voucher looked old. 2. The name on the voucher didn't match the receipt. 3. The receipt nor the voucher matched the court order. And 4. Their ID was expired. Alert! Alert! Giant red flags waving in the breeze. Everything that I'd been taught was screaming at me that this was bad, and that it was going to end badly. I made the necessary copies for my records of all of the information like always, except this time 2 of everything, and actually circled all of the discrepancies in red marker, and then told the visitor that I needed to get the checkbook from another office. It would take a little while to get the signatures, and mine, needed and release of funds, required 2 other signatures. I first went to my immediate supervisor, TL, and explained the situation to her. I showed her every single solitary piece of paperwork, pointed out all of what I'd circled, that the information didn't match on any of forms in any way at all. She literally did a quick scan and said, "It's okay. Do it." I know that I stood there with my mouth opening and closing with no words coming out for a full 2 minutes, shaking my head and in shock before I said, "Wait, did you really look at what I'm showing you? There's something wrong with all of it. I think it's forgery and fraud about to be committed." Her words were, "I said do it," while pushing all of the paperwork across her desk back to me. "Are you sure? Do you want to look at it again? You do realize that I'm supposed to cut a check for $97,000? I asked. "No, it's fine. Do it, so that you can get back to your other work." I then told her that I was really uncomfortable completing the transaction and that I wanted to speak to TD about it. And so I walked across the hall, tapped on TD's door, and asked if we could discuss the transaction. Now, mind you, TD is the department head. One of the signatures needed to finalize the paperwork. The other person to sign would be the accounts payable department head. I spread both sets of copies of the papers across his desk and again explained in detail the situation and what was wrong with all of it. At least he took a few more minutes to pore over the paperwork, unlike TL. And so I thought, okay, he's paying attention. He'll see everything that's wrong with this. He'll make a call downstairs and have a couple of officers up here in no time. Nope. He literally said, "It's all good. Do it."
TD, it's not all good. Please look at it all again,
I pleaded. Now's a good time to tell everyone that I worked for lawyers for 5 years straight out of high school, and one of the best things that I've ever learned was what definitely became my lifelong motto: cover your own ass and don't take the fall for other people. And that mindset has been good to me. Again, I pleaded with TD to look closely at the paperwork. I pointed out all of the discrepancies again. The wrong name, the papier being the wrong color and looking old, the expired state ID, everything. And again he said, "I said do it." Okay, I thought. This is one of the times when you know for certain that this is going to come back and bite you in the ass. But remember when I said that I worked for lawyers for 5 years in my earlier career? Well, I remembered them always saying, signatures are everything. Now, normally the only time I would need signatures are when the checks are actually cut. But this time I was definitely going to take it oh so much further. Back out to the copier I went for one more copy of all of the paperwork. First stop was the supervisor, TL. TL, I need your signature to finish this transaction. Sign and date here, and here. Yes, everywhere. I'd made a notation in red marker. Thank you. And off I went back to TD to get his signature. Sorry to bother you, TD, but I need your signature and date here, and here. All the while thinking, you two won't be having me accused and arrested for conspiring with a total stranger. With that done, I asked TD one more time, "Are you sure that you want me to complete this transaction after everything that I've pointed out? Cut a check and send the visitor on his way?" TD never looked up from what he was reading and said yes, so that's what I did. Completed the steps necessary to cut the $90,000 check and send the visitor on his merry way. 3 weeks later, all hell broke loose. "OP, my office now!" My head has never whipped back and forth so fast in my entire life as they both talked at the same time. TD beat red and TL wringing her hands in frustration. "Shut the door," TL said. And then I could barely understand what was being said, but eventually figured out that it was about the transaction and check that I'd written prior. Yep, we, and I say we very, very loosely, handed over close to $100K to the wrong person. They handed me a record of everything that was currently happening because of that transaction. The commissioner's memo, the judge's orders, the investigation procedures, the assigned case number and detectives, the names of the bank representatives. I was told that there was an ongoing investigation and I'd be contacted by the bank and detectives shortly, and lastly that I might be fired. "What do you have to say for yourself?" TD asked forcefully while slapping the top of his desk, to which I replied, "I did what I was supposed to do. I did what I was told to do. Don't you remember signing off on it all?" I said matter-of-factly. They both spluttered something to the effect of, "I would never." "I have an MBA and I've been doing this for 30 years. No, this is your mistake. This is not going to end well for you, etc." I almost burst out laughing because it very much sounded like the teacher from the Charlie Brown cartoons. You know, wah, wah. but I was in no way worried. I calmly got up out of the chair that I'd been perched on the edge of, excused myself, walked to my office, picked up my purse and got my desk key out, opened the drawer and pulled out the folder that I had made of that one particular transaction. I had purposely kept it separate from the other copies, just in case those papers somehow magically disappeared. Since TL was commonly and routinely famous for going through our desks, I walked back to TD's office and set the folder on his desk in front of him and waited. "What's this?" TD asked me. "Just open it," I said. He spent more time going through those papers than he had when he should have been paying a hell of a lot more attention 3 weeks ago. He finally looked across his desk at me with wide eyes, and I just blinked back at him, not saying a word. TL asked, "Well, what is it?" And so he hands her the file but never takes his eyes off of me. I swear that in that moment I could hear her gulp loudly. For me it was a no, so you two think that I'm going to take the fall for this one? Moment. No. Nope. Not today, not tomorrow, not next month, not ever. And then I waited some more. You could definitely hear a feather drop. The room had gotten so quiet. As I said, I did what I was supposed to do, just like you two told me. "Anything else you need me to clear up?" I asked. TD and TL couldn't speak. Neither could find their voices in the moment, so I just quietly left the office, shut the door behind me, and smiled all the way back to my office. What happened with the ongoing investigation, I'll never know. The subject was never brought up again. Hell, I did just what they both told me to do. They're the bosses, right? Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.